Hello everyone, Tim here, Silver Coda. Today we're doing something a little bit different to normal. We're going off on a slight tangent. I've got the one and only Jim McKeith here, and today we're going to be talking about mental health. So it's something that we're both very passionate about. We tend to think now, while things are improving, it's somewhat overlooked. And we are, with our own stories and what we've heard from others, we think that software developers, can struggle with this. We want to also make it clear that we are not professionals. We are just people with a lived experience, and we're going to share our stories a little bit. And this is not medical advice. We just want to raise a little bit of awareness, and we would encourage anyone who is concerned about their mental health to consider reaching out to a GP or a qualified professional. And so I think what I might do is hand it over to Jim to introduce himself and to maybe share a little bit about his life experiences in this sort of area. And over to you, Jim.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I think that we talked a little bit about wanting to do this for quite a while, and then we're like, well, what's the goal? And really, I think my goal is, just as we share our experiences, that maybe if someone can relate to it, they can be like, oh, I'm not alone. And I've been surprised the number of times that I've had that conversation with people, and they're like, oh, wow, I can totally relate to that. I just thought that was me. So that's kind of the goal is, and if you do, as Tim said, if you do really connect with this, then talk to a professional. We're not going to diagnose you. You can't really diagnose yourself. And I still talk to a professional regularly. But yeah. So yeah, we had when we first started talking, Tim, we realized that we had shared some mental health struggles, and so we're like, oh, we should definitely talk about this. For me, so I'm in my 50s, just barely. I can't believe it, and it's a only probably in the last 10 years, really, that I was started to get diagnosed, and I don't. At least for me, the process of getting diagnosed has been kind of weird. I guess it's not so much been about trying to put a label on me as in trying to identify, oh, this symptom can be treated in this way, this symptom can be treated in this way. Oh, these symptoms together might be this, and trying to understand it. So it's really more about trying to understand me than it is trying to put me in a box, which I appreciate. Is that what your experience has been like, or what's it been like for you?
I will say the way I would describe my story, if you want to call it that, is I don't want to say a little bit of everything. So when I was, let's say, diagnosed, and we're going back to about 7-8 years now. So I'm in my mid 50s, so probably slightly older than you are, and it was. So basically, so look, what I've got is I think it was major. I'm going to call it major anyway. Major anxiety, major depression, and suicidal ideation. We would add into that list there. You can read online about possibilities of what you think it might be, but if you talk to a professional, then you're going to say, yeah, nah. And something had happened in my, after a work day, where I was quieter than usual, and this had happened over a few years, etc. And honestly, I thought that what I was going through was every person goes through this, every man goes through this, and because again, I just didn't really talk about it, obviously, because. And I find also, as a slight tangent, that software is hard to talk to your partner about because, where do you start? Where do you end? How deep do you go without swearing? And so, something that I held it within me, but I did one of those, K10 tests. I don't know if you have them over there. And it's basically 10 questions where you rate yourself in, do you feel blue over the last 4 weeks or whatever. And it said that I should, we suggest that you check in with your GP. So I did that, and uh, basically my GP, nice person, wanted a second referral, or sorry, wanted a second opinion, I should say,
Right.
and did that. And that's when so after the first session, which was just sort of like which was the second opinion, so to speak, was you better go down and get a mental health care plan. And I said, oh. And like I said, it was weeks after that I would find out about, get that diagnosis as such. So it's a big jump from, thinking that, well, hey, this is normal, and to, there's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm going to say that but, between then and now, there are things or little indicators for me, let's say in my 30s or 20s or whatever else, which could have pointed me to say, hey, there's a problem. And, but, I never did anything about it. And, I mean, here's for instance, I would in my 20s, I would even say something as, let's say crazy as, hey, if I got, it wouldn't be a problem if I got hit by a bus. Because for me, I say there's no bills to pay, there's no everything else, but something as what's the word, a throwaway line like that,
Right.
can be can indicate something depending on who you are, I'll say. But so it was a big jump from uh, having thinking that thinking that it was something that everyone went through, to something that I've looked between. I have let's say developed coping tools. I've got a couple of tools on my
Yeah.
phone here as well, that I use, and I guess that's where my journey started. But and even then, when I started to speak to people, well, when people would ask me about it, again, it gave them permission to maybe share some of their story. And I realized that it wasn't just me. But all having said that, um, it was, I don't know if I felt that I had to give them permission to talk, or why they felt they couldn't talk, or I would then find that other developers had that. And why don't we talk about this sort of stuff? If you've got a problem, why can't you talk about it?
Yeah.
And it's obviously then you find out that it's something that, let's say, men don't really talk about either, because we just don't do that sort of thing. So for me, I wanted to be able to, I want people to be able to have permission to talk about it. So rather than going down that slippery slope towards, whatever it might be, to be able to be proactive and do something about it for themselves.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. For me, I started getting diagnosed or talking to a professional about it. Well, I had talked to a couple therapists about other things throughout the years, and a couple times it had been mentioned that I might have anxiety, but
Mm,
I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand what that meant, and so I never really did anything about it. And I also remember it's one of those things that as I'm learning more about, so for me, it's ADHD,
mm,
anxiety, and depression are
mhm,
the main things. But as I'm learning more about these, especially the ADHD, there are so many things that I was like, this is my personality, that I'm now learning, no, this is a symptom of ADHD. Um,
mm,
uh, and I was just talking to my mom fairly recently, I guess it's like maybe 2 years ago. And she was telling me something about when I was in kindergarten. And I'm like, oh, I didn't remember this, but the way she was describing it was exactly a description of a kid with ADHD. So, and
mm,
then uh, recently, other family members, siblings, and cousins and stuff have gotten diagnosis and suspect that other, like my dad, my aunts and uncles and stuff like that, possibly also suffered from ADHD. So, there's a genetic component of it as well, and
mm,
that's one thing I want to take a step back. That one thing I've learned is that there all these things, depression, anxiety, ADHD, etc., are on a spectrum.
Mm.
and they're everybody suffers. So depression is an easy example to talk about, right? Something tragic happens in your life, you feel depressed. That is a normal feeling to have. But
Yep.
when that depression lasts longer, lasts a long time, or is really hindering your ability to function as a human being,
Mm.
then it's potentially a depression disorder. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, so I hear people sometimes argue, well, everybody has ADHD a little bit, and it's like, well, when it really hinders your life, then it's a disorder.
Well, yeah, no. Well, typically, something like when it comes to take grief, for example, it's natural to feel, you know, um, angry, sad, and all that sort of stuff afterwards or after the event.
Right.
But if that feeling lasts longer than, let's say, 6 months, whatever, then it's okay to do something about it. The other thing which I forgot to mention with um, my story, if you want, in that sort of context, and I'm going to sort of half borrow a story, one of those stories from Big Bang Theory, unfortunately, or fortunately. I described it as well, in my case, it was a slow. I don't want to call it a slow descent into madness because it's not really madness. But little things would happen, throughout my life, and where I consider my inner being, whatever, having like a shield.
Hmm.
And when something happens, it's like a laser beam, hitting the shield, and it fractures slightly. And your
Oh,
little workmen, they all go out and they fix it up. But the shield isn't quite as strong as it was once.
right.
And every time something happened, the shield gets fractured a bit more. And every time the workers go out and they fix it. But over time, it becomes weaker and weaker and weaker. And, and going back about 7, 8 years ago, it was that, sort of something to uh, where that laser beam sort of like, basically shattered that shield, and for
Mhm.
me then, said, hey, you need to do something. Now, other people will have, different experiences. And it's one of those things where everyone's own story will be unique. Like my story is going to be different to yours, will be different to, you know, Joe down the road who, writes COBOL code or whatever. So, you just because, if you think there is being safe is better than being sorry, I guess is what I'm trying to say as well.
Yeah, when I was first, when there was first being diagnosed with anxiety, which was the first thing I was. So interestingly, undiagnosed ADHD leads to anxiety and depression.
Okay.
So um, current thinking is that my ADHD is the underlying issue that has manifest into anxiety and depression. But when I was
Yeah.
first diagnosed with anxiety, I remember actually hearing about other people talk about their anxiety and being like,
Mm.
that's not at all like my anxiety. I'm doing anxiety wrong. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you actually think, well, I'm not like that, therefore it's not me.
yeah, yep. One of the,
So go on.
so one of the things that just like a few weeks ago, one of my therapists I was talking to said that the one thing that's interesting about ADHD is that as opposed to some of the other mental disorders, with ADHD, your brain recognizes that that something's wrong.
Okay.
So with depression and anxiety and other like paranoia or whatever, usually that your reality, it's just your reality, right? And
Yeah.
thinking about it, it makes sense. Like when I feel depressed, it's just like that is what's going on. That is the world. That's the reality. But with the
Mm.
ADHD, it's like, why can't I do this? It's like I know I need to pay the bills, but I cannot get myself to pay the bills. And that's the thing.
Oh,
That's one
okay.
example, but that's one of
Mm.
the things that's different about ADHD. And so that's part of why ADHD leads to the other two, is because then you're like frustrated because you're anxious because you're like, I got to pay the bills, but I can't pay the bills. And then later you're like, my life's terrible because I can't pay the bills, And so
Mm.
it it leads to the other two because of that.
That sounds like not imposter syndrome, um, or perfectionism, or a mixture of the two.
Those
'Cause,
also
there's
go in hand to hand with it.
well, no, it's one of the things where, I guess, one of the things which my psychologist sort of like taught me was rather than saying should, is to use wish. Um, rather than saying I should be able to do this, or I should be able to pay my bills, saying I wish I could pay my bills, that
Right.
sort of thing. Now, where other thing which did you want? I guess I have a question for you. Is this something that you, as this conversation goes on, and it may take more than, let's say, one video? Did you want to concentrate on developers, make it a little bit more broader than that, or what were your thoughts in that space?
Well, so what I would like to see come from this is um, that maybe we can provide some resources for other developers. I think that's probably
Mm.
your primary audience is going to be developers.
Yeah.
So we can look at it from a developer point of view, but just for people to understand that maybe that they're not alone, but at the same time you know stop struggling in silence.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say, oh, I'm not alone, but then it's another thing to actually take the steps to get help. And I found that for me, a lot of times that's like the really hard part. And like even like asking at work and saying, you know what, this doesn't work for me. I need this to be able to focus. I need this to be able to do things. Usually when I ask for it, it's people are very accommodating, but it's really hard for me to typically ask for what it is I need. Um, and I don't know if that's an imposter syndrome thing or a self-esteem issue or what, but yeah.
That's something you talk to your therapist about.
Yep.
Um, so how did it? How did what sort? Tell me about some of your roles and how it may have. What effect did it have? With you in those roles. At the different places you've worked.
Well, ADHD is interesting because what it really is it's executive dysfunction. And so what it
Mm.
is there's the part of your brain that's like, this is what I want you. That's like trying to make the decisions about what we're going to do next, right? What's important, what's priority, how long should these things take, that organizes it all.
Yep.
Is not effective. And so it shows up both as inability to pay attention, but also hyper focus.
Okay.
Okay. And so what that shows up like for me sometimes, and then I can talk about roles, but I love vector graphics like SVGs.
Yep.
And every now and then my son will like come down in the morning. My son still lives with me,
Yep.
more as a roommate, but anyway, he'll like in the morning come down and I'm still sitting at the computer working, and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I felt the need to go on to Wikipedia and convert all the graphics to SVGs and upload them. And I'll just go picking random graphics off Wikipedia and converting them into SVGs and uploading them. It's like, and I'll do that all night long.
Huh? Okay.
And so what that means a lot of times for me, and from a work perspective, is if it's a project that requires hyper focus, once I can get into the hyper focus, get focused on it, then I can just plow through it and get it done. But when there are things that require me to like do a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here, I want to just pick something and then tear it apart, understand it, figure it all out, and then put it back together better again. And that's what works best for me. And so when I'm not in that situation, then it gets really stressful and frustrating for me.
And how did that appear to other? How did that appear? Let's say for affect others.
So I am if I have some development to do or a
Mm.
presentation. So, for the past 15 years I was a developer advocate.
Yeah.
And if it's like, hey, we want you to do a video or a presentation or talk on this topic,
Mm-hmm.
I am golden, right? I might be late getting into it frequently, but once I get into it, man, I can just go through it and come out the other side with a really good understanding of it and be able to explain it. But if it's things like, we need you to fill out your timesheet, man, you're gonna have to email me 3 times. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
Uh,
do you
and
ever have
so
any sort of procrastination in there as well when you're trying to get to the hyper focus stage, or?
yes, so procrastination is a big part of it as well. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, and ADHD so often shows up as, or frequently looks um, like laziness or just being sloppy. But at the
Mm.
same time, when I'm in that hyper focus, then it's like, wow, you did really good work. And so and that's part of the frustrating dichotomy of it, is that you, people are like, oh my goodness, this is great, but you didn't do your timesheet again. It's like, dang it. You know,
Yeah.
so
Well.
yeah, it shows up as procrastination, it shows up as perfectionism, it shows up as
Mm.
um imposter syndrome,
Mm.
at least in my life and from what I've read. But yeah.
So you brought up, let's just say, three things there with the imposter syndrome, perfectionism, etc. One of the other things which I'm just going to add into that mix would be, uh, I'm going to call it the effect of working remotely can have a big impact on it. Now, I'm not going to go into that right now, but it's something that um, I feel can have an effect in how developers do or don't perform, in
Mhm.
terms of, and that also relates to work-life balance, which is also important. So like with all these things, what sort of topics, would you like to cover, in this series here then?
I think talking about work-life balance, especially
Mm,
working from home, is good. It would be something to talk about. It's something that I've studied a lot, but I still don't feel like I
mm,
do a very good job at.
yeah.
um, that's kind of, when it comes to a lot of this mental health topics, it's things that I've learned a lot about it, but I still consistently struggle with,
Mm,
unfortunately. I am better, honestly, but it is still, I feel like I'm not as good as I should be or would like to be with those.
mm.
Wish I was.
Okay, just on a s- semi-related note, I understand that you get, once you get into a topic, you said you get hyper focused in it. Did this have the same thing applied for you and your own mental health? Like insofar as I've got this, I need to. Well, okay, what does this mean? How do I fix it? How what are the steps I need to take, etc.
Sometimes. So there are, um, it, it's, it is a rabbit hole. I say a rabbit
Mm,
hole, like I will go down and start
mm,
looking into that. But then what oftentimes happens is, I then have to do something else. And then when I shift gears, then this is gone. Right.
okay.
And so I remember when I went down that rabbit hole on mental health, on
Mm,
ADHD, but it's not my hyper focus now. It's this. And then it's like, oh shoot, I didn't do this. I got to go do that. I got to go do that. And so, um, it's, things have to get, or usually, um, things I'm not interested in have to be very loud to get my
okay.
attention. And then once they get my attention, if I can, then I'll do it. Although I say that, but I've also, I've learned, there's a lot of things I've discovered that I've learned as ways to cope with it. Like, for example, if I go to a restaurant that has like a sports bar that has TVs, I will always sit so I'm looking at the minimum number of TVs possible, and I will try to,
Okay. Yeah.
not be looking at them because I know that it will just suck me in.
Okay. Um, yeah, because like, cause the other things which I would and you can maybe tell me if any of these apply to you. Topics that I'm speaking purely about me as a developer here. Some of the things which I feel would be common, maybe to people who work in the software space is, and this because if you've got, let's say, 10 years experience, for instance, or 20 or more, uh, there is this, you think, well, I should be able to, well, okay, got to write something new. Here's a new technology. I should be able to pick it up like that. Um, but things don't cook as fast as 2-minute noodles. Or is that expectation that because there is something, you've got that experience that they think that, well, you should be able to do that in 5 minutes as well. I also, and so perfectionism is something also. When you, back in the day, when you were, and I know you're old enough to, when the magazines were around, Dr. Dobbs and so on,
Mhm.
programming magazines, the code was always neat. And when you come into the real world, your code would eventually become ugly. And that was something which would, uh, when I say irritate me, it was irritating to the extent that I let my code get like that, and I wasn't given the opportunity to make it neater. So having to, there's that aspect of it. There is also the one of the things also which I was or am good at is catastrophization, where something, but something like the report's not working, becomes the end of the world. But if you understand what the problem really is, it's not that big of, it's not maybe that big of a deal. Then there's also things like, if there's, when a customer says, your program sucks, it's not necessary, not to say that it's a comment directed directly at you, maybe. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But these are, all sorts of things which, as a developer, I had to go through.
That comments your program sucks. This is something that comes up for me from time to time, and I put a lot of thought into it. So, like, for example, you're on a team and you get a bug report on some code you did. It's like, oh,
Mm,
here's a bug. Um, there was years ago a top 10 things you're likely to hear if you work in a Klingon software development, work with Klingon programmers or something like that. And one of them
yeah,
was by filing this bug report, you have challenged the honor of my family, prepare to die in ritual combat. And there are times when I get a bug report that is like, how dare you insult my
yeah,
code? You've insulted my family. I will slay you in combat. But I've been on this other side as well of doing code reviews and
mm,
other situations where I am reviewing things for people and giving feedback. And one of the things I will tell people when I'm going into it, and so I try and remind myself of this, not always successfully, is that my goal in reviewing that for them is not to find where they've made a mistake, but instead to help them maybe discover something they weren't aware of, or find other situations, right? Help them to do better, not to point out where they were wrong. And so again, I understand it from an intellectual point of view, but I still get the look for my bat list sometimes when I get a bug report.
mm. I think, but depending on your what you may have been, the role that you were in as the developer or team leader, even then, sometimes I would be the person they would go to last. Okay, so they've exhausted all avenues basically,
Mhm.
and then okay, we got to go to Tim now for help, and you already have, let's say, an irate customer, probably an irate dealer, you know, um, and you're the last man, you're the last man standing, so you're pushing it uphill a bit. And those sorts of experiences, those sorts of experience can have an impact on how you cope with things, but also it means that, well, if I'm going to be in that position, I also need to have tools to be able to handle that. And that's something also which I would hope that we could maybe consider or tackle in an episode.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
it's
I was thinking about that, like
Mm.
the whole soft skills category is a really important one, and that we don't usually hear talked about. I feel like, and part of this is a stereotype, but the idea that a lot of times developer people gravitate towards software development to not have to deal with people, but then the reality is you have to deal with people if you're a software developer.
Well, you do these days. Look, because did you have? I'm gonna go out. Did you have a what's the word, a formal education in software, or were you sort of like self-taught?
Self-taught.
Okay, so I had the formal education route, and there was so this is back in the early 90s, so just before Windows would have come out, in that respect. I did computer science, uh, let's say graphics programming first assignment. I can't remember whether it was in C or assembly, but the point was, a typical assignment or the first assignment if you're doing graphics would be to draw a circle. You have to remember, this is before when you had to do things, you had to implement the math functions yourself, the pixel, etc.
Yeah.
But in the entire degree, there would be nothing in terms. Oh, and they talk about having to gather requirements if you did, let's say, a software engineering course. But as far as the notion that a developer would have to interact with another person, let's say the foreign concept,
Mhm.
these days, so those soft skills of being able to listen, to understand, to reflect what the person is saying in terms of, okay, so you want to have a box here with this in it, are probably just as important. I wouldn't say more important, but to actually listen to what someone is saying, whether it is a mental health topic or whether it is what they want.
Yeah, that I found that in management, so often just listening is like the most important thing. When I've managed people, that if they come to me with an issue, oftentimes if I just listen and say, okay, how can we fix this, then they're good.
Yeah.
If it's like, okay, I accept what you're saying, I accept what's going on for you, what can I do to help you? Usually that's all people need, is just someone to hear them and
Mm,
to accept them. And I know fundamentally I can identify with that as well, that there's, when I get frustrated is when I feel like people aren't listening to me and
mm,
aren't accepting me. So
mm. Just a something else which I would hope that we might be able to draw out in this series, perhaps, is to get the community, Delphi, Free Pascal, C programmers, whoever, to be able to provide questions or topics, for discussion.
yeah,
Maybe even, depend. Look, I'm not saying anyone and everyone, but and maybe if there were people who out there who wanted to share their experiences, they might be able to do so as well with us. How do you feel about that?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of uh, community collaboration
Mm.
for sure.
Do you? what is how does the and in that respect, I guess, how does the US world in mental health, in software development, is it something that is looked upon with empathy or kindness, or is it frowned upon talking about that sort of stuff?
I feel like it's improving, that it's more looked
Mm,
on with empathy and kindness and less of the otherwise, but that's probably going to vary a lot from company to company, from team to team, even within
mm,
companies. Um, but I do feel like the overall is shifting. There is still, yeah, I feel like it's improved.
mm,
And but again, I have limited. I can speak from my experiences at companies and from um, what I've heard. I don't have any larger
mm.
data on that.
Yeah. Probably two-part question here. What would need to change in that respect? And uh, in saying that, what would be your goal, for this series?
So honestly, I'm gonna start with my big, hairy, audacious goal. Right? What's
Go
the big
for it.
thing? And I feel like, um, and this isn't a U.S. specific thing. Although I think U.S. is probably um, it's probably a more U.S. probably embodies this more than elsewhere, but I feel like I see this
Mm,
globally. Is this um, I think the idea of the 40-hour work week and the hustle of doing work is kind of outdated, right?
yeah,
And if we look back, I mean, yes, at the start of the Industrial Revolution, people were working 60 to 80-hour work weeks, and then unions came in and there was reform, and we kind of standardized on 40, but we still see a lot of companies, especially in tech, where it's not uncommon to have like crunch time that people are working ridiculous hours. I've done that a lot.
yeah,
And so I think ideally I would like to see kind of more focus globally in work-life balance, right?
mm,
But then also in kind of that uh, accepting that that we don't have to um,
kill ourselves,
kill
metaphorically.
ourselves. Because I know that when I was younger, that was like 80 whatever hours a week, no problem, I can do that. That's easy to do. But now that I'm older, it's like, you know what, that was not good. And
Yeah,
I think I did okay work-life balance. I still I have uh, kids that I get along with really well, still
mm,
see them, so apparently I did something right. But I think, but at the same time, I've always pretty much always enjoyed what I do for work, so
yeah.
it was never a slog. But my goal would be to kind of see kind of a overall improvement of that, and a separation from this idea that we all need to be working all the time to do things, that it's okay to not work sometimes.
And
um
go
yeah,
on.
yeah, so that would be, but as far as like goal for the series would definitely be to normalize talking about soft skills, about talking about
Mm,
mental health, and
mm.
just help people understand that it's not just them, and that there is hope and there is
Not
help.
terminal
What's
as
that?
well. It's not. It's not terminal.
Yeah, it's not terminal. Yeah.
Well, that was sort of some look. It felt like with in some people when um you so when they ask you how you're going, or when they find out that you have depression, it's like, oh, so what can I do to help you? How will you survive? It's almost like their questioning or their wording is like, are you going to make it past next week? You
Yeah.
know,
Well,
um,
I say I have allergies, seasonal allergies, like hay fever and grass and all that stuff
mm,
as well. And I think for me, it feels like anxiety and depression are kind of like allergies, right?
Mm,
Sometimes I'm sniffing, and I know it's like, oh, I just mowed the lawn, right? Pollen's really high today. Other times it's like I have no idea why I'm sniffing. I'm just sniffling.
yeah.
And
Mm,
that's what anxiety and depression is for me. Is sometimes it's like, oh, I'm nervous about this. But other times
yeah,
it's like, I don't know why I just feel overwhelmed right now. And
mm,
someone asking me, like, what is it? How can I help? It's like, I don't know.
mm. The other the other thing also, which was on in my head, by the way, about this sort of idea or topic, is that uh, in Australia here, I'm going to ask the really dumb question: is that I'm guessing you'd have it over there, Movember, Movember, which is basically men grow moustaches for men's mental health.
Yeah. Um,
So
I did that one year and no shave November or whatever it is. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was a long
yeah,
time ago.
mm. So no, I think this is a happy coincidence. We're sort of like we could be starting this now.
Yeah.
Uh, I once did this is for a mental health organisation over here. I was on a radio and or being interviewed on the radio, and one of the um, things which I sort of like said then, and I still believe it now, was that um, men, me, we typically leave it until we are at rock bottom, and then say, "Oh, I need to do something," or I don't do anything. That's the other possibility. And so my goal would maybe be to, as far as this series would be concerned, is to again to normalize the this topic, or these sort of discussions, and to maybe, if I had have recognized maybe some of the signs earlier, that rather than having to go down there, it could be like that.
Hmm.
um, Mental health, again, one of the things which again in my own therapy was that if 5 years is considered a long time, and I've been dealing with this for 45 without any help, how long will that take to fix? you know, if
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
Um,
Your comment
and
about the laser chipping things away, I was thinking about that. And there's times in my life where it's like, I don't know. I mean, years and years and years ago, where it's like, I feel like I'm being worn down. Like the line from Lord of the Rings, like butter spread over too much bread, just being
yeah,
spread thin and then just
oh,
being
too thin,
stretched
yeah, yeah.
further and further and further all the time. And then,
Mm.
yeah.
By the way, that story that I did use, it was when Penny was telling one of the, I think one of the girlfriends of one of them, or one of the friends, about that how not Howard, sorry, that Sheldon had a Star Wars, no, it's not Star Wars, Star Trek, and it was a shield. So that's where that sort of idea came from, but the one that resonates. And the
Hmm.
other thing also, by the way, but in having said, knowing if I dealt with it earlier, let's say 20, 30 years ago, mental health wasn't so much of a topic as such. But it's really only existed for, let's say 100 years ago, you'd go to a mental asylum. Nowadays, it's a different beast, but it's a slow moving beast, in terms of, change. So having said that, I think then, if we could get people to, share their own their own ideas for topics and questions, maybe if they want to share their own things, and also, and if you are out there in the community and you would like to ask us a question, or you would like to contribute in some other way, let Jim or myself know. We'll probably provide in the description, or at least my email address, you can talk to one of us. And I guess if we were to wrap up, I wonder, what have you learnt about yourself, in this time since you started getting that professional therapy, or what message would you hope viewers might take away?
I think the biggest one is maybe that you're okay and everything's okay.
Mm,
um, the like you said, catastrophizing. There's so many times that it's been like it's the end of the world, or I failed or something like that, and realizing, you know what, that's it. You're okay. Everything's
mm,
okay. We're all going to be okay. And sometimes, you know, I've had things go bad and things
mm,
actually go worse than I expected them to, but that's okay.
mm,
Sometimes they're not. Sometimes things don't work out, but that's still okay. Actually, I mentioned before we started, I did improv for about
oh,
10 years. Or did I
yeah.
mention that? I didn't mention that.
No, maybe I don't remember. Either I wasn't paying attention or you didn't tell me. One of the two.
It was a different
Uh,
meeting I had earlier today. I was a professional improv performer for 10 years
oh, yep.
and did shows um, 1 to 2 times a week, traveled around the country. Actually, probably did shows in probably 10 different states. Anyway,
Okay.
um, and one of the core tenets of improv is yes and it's this idea that whatever happens is okay, and that's now the new situation. And so there are rules about what you do and how you do things, but you're also working with other people. And if somebody else comes out and breaks something, so let's say you come out and you set up a car that you're working on and someone walked through the car, right? They weren't paying attention, they missed that, or you didn't set it up well, whatever the case is, that doesn't matter. The reality is now this car has a hole in it, or now this car is
Yep.
phases in and out of existence, or whatever it is, right? You
Mm,
still then take whatever happens and you work with it. And so yeah, mistakes happen, but it's okay. You just
mm,
gotta to take it and work with it and do the best you
mm,
can with what you got. And trying to stress about the situation isn't going to make it any better.
mm. I think, and I would agree with you on, that it's okay, and to know that you're doing the best you can, and that's all you can be asked to do. Me, that you are, as a developer, you are good enough as you are. Um, it may not fit, it may not fit what the employer is looking for in terms of, I expected X, Y, Z, and you delivered, A, B, and C. But that's a different kettle of fish again. But um, you know, you you've made it this far as a developer. So that's worth something, and you're worth something. And uh, if you can, and if there is a problem, don't be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. And, also, and this is something I'm working on as well, is that realizing that your self worth is not defined by your ability to write code.